Back on Morning Line, thanks for joining us. Nick Barris along with Professor John Weil from MTSU. I was talking earlier and we're discussing the debate and taking your calls. Love to hear from you, 737-7587, what you thought. But John, there was a comment this morning from Rudy Giuliani saying that if he were Trump, he may not participate in any of the future debates. And his primary complaint, though, wasn't that because Trump didn't do well. It was more along the lines of, well, I want to make sure that we have a moderator who is not a fact checker. And it seemed like he was upset to some degree with Lester Holt, maybe over the issue of whether or not the frisking law in New York City was unconstitutional or whatever. But where do you come down on this? I understand as a moderator, it's about the candidates and you just let them throw it out. And if they want to throw out a bunch of lies, the media that's watching later can revise it. What role do you think the host should play in terms of, I don't think they should be fact checkers, but in this case, Trump challenged Lester. And so I think Lester Holt had a right to come back and say, well, no, the judge found it unconstitutional.
Again, I think they gave probably as much leeway as we have had in any prior debate this year. And part of that is that you had two candidates rather than a multitude. So you didn't have quite the time issues that you sometimes have. I think you got to call it in an individual case. I actually think the specific issue may be a little more muddled than it seems. The Supreme Court has upheld, the U.S. Supreme Court in Terry versus Ohio, has upheld stop and frisk. Mm-hmm. Now, what I think was at issue in the New York case was, stop and frisk is done in cases where you have good reason to believe that someone is about to commit a crime or has just done so. Mm-hmm. If you do it simply on the basis, well, that person doesn't look right, or it's a little darker skin than somebody else, or what are they doing here, then that's a completely different thing. And I think the New York case had more to do with the implementation and being perceived as being perhaps racially tinged rather than stop and frisk itself.
I'll tell you what, I mean, I've watched a lot of debates over the years, and many good moderators. One of my favorites, Jim Lehrer,
He's
when he would
good.
get very straightforward and all of this from McNeil Lehrer, NewsHour years ago. Now it's, I guess, the NewsHour on PBS. But I tire of any candidate, Democrat, Republican, who comes out of some debate and then blames the moderator for a poor performance. I just don't buy it. I've never seen
Trump had sort of set this up in advance.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, in my opinion. Blaming the moderators in any of these debates, and it's happened before with candidates saying, well, that one, it's bull. It's bull. You find a way to make it work. I don't see the moderators who know they have to be as fair as they possibly can, trying to sway things. A lot of pressure on them. Yeah, I just don't buy it. Let's go to Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Nick.
Good morning, Peter. What's on your mind?
Okay, I just want to say I thought Trump's main job was to act presidential, and he did that. So I think, for me, he won the debate. But as for the commentators, I don't think Donald complained at all. I saw the interview with him this morning. He said that he thought that Lester Holt did an all right job. But I was really concerned myself with the fact that he gave Hillary such softball questions. Nothing about Benghazi, nothing against her email frauds and scandals, nothing against the Clinton Foundation, none of the really questions that should have been asked. None of those were asked. So I wasn't too impressed with him. I noticed that her campaign cried and whined and were babies about Matt Lauer when he asked her normal, simple, probing questions. She has a background. I think she needs to answer her background. As for the tax returns, I think that he should release his tax returns. She should release the transcripts of her speeches to the Wall Street bankers. She got over $1 million for several speeches. What was in those speeches? And she has not released the transcripts. Thanks, Nick.
All right, thank you for your call. Okay.
I'd sure like to know what $1 million speech is myself.
Yeah, man, what's
I'd like
$1
to give a
speech?
few.
That's pretty sweet. What's in the subject matter?
There's anybody out there listening?
Well, listen, there's ample opportunity for him to hear, I think, maybe them touching on some of these other issues as they come up. The next presidential debate will be Sunday, October 9th at Washington University in St. Louis. And that's going to be a town meeting, a town hall meeting type thing, where half the questions will come from the participants and the other from the moderators. So, when participants mean, they're going to hand select a crowd, and they'll have some questions. The moderators' questions will be based on public interest topics determined by social media and other sources. So it'll be more of a free-for-all as opposed to last night. You saw there was a structure, national security, foreign affairs, things like that. And so you never know what kind of question you're going to get from a crowd.
No, you don't.
So, I mean, there could be someone like him in the crowd who could ask about any one of those questions.
Sure. And, there were questions that were not asked of either candidate.
Sure. You can only cover so much.
Trump University wasn't covered last night. Clinton Foundation wasn't. So they sort of even themselves out. I think, especially if there are, in fact, 3 presidential debates, there's still some time for some other issues. But I do think the first debate is likely to have had the biggest audience and probably will make the biggest impact.
Yeah, I imagine I will. Being in this business, we'll be doing shows on this.
Sure.
Watch the other 2, but clearly already. For me, I was really engaged in this first one to just see how it was, and that satisfied some of my appetite for it. And so there's not going to be as much anticipation for the next ones. And by the way, the 3rd presidential debate will be 10 days later in October, on October 19th at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and it's going to be the same format as what we had last night.
If I can follow up on one comment that Peter made, I do think he's right that particularly in the first 30 minutes, Trump did look presidential, and there's a sense in which Clinton had more to lose than he did, because if you can appear on the stage with someone who has been a Secretary of State and maybe don't do quite as well, but you pretty much hold your own, similar effect, again going back to 1960, you had a senator versus a vice president. Well, vice president is generally considered higher, but if you're on this, if you're on the same stage with the vice president as Kennedy was and seemed to have pretty much equal knowledge of things, then it probably works in your favor.
And can you put a definition on what presidential is? I should have asked him, what is presidential? Or are you commenting on his demeanor, his appearance, the way he answered certain questions early on? What was your take?
A combination of those, and I think part of it does come down to we've had, particularly in the vice presidential arena, we've had a candidate or two who they give a 20-second answer to a question and then they were pretty much done. They really didn't have any more to elaborate, and one could question the accuracy of some of the elaborations last night, but both sort of went toe-to-toe and drilled down a little farther into the issues maybe than they typically do.
All right, let's go next to Taylor. Good morning, Taylor.
Good morning, Nick.
Hi.
And to you and the professor.
Thank you.
The Trump supporter, I was disappointed last night. I thought the first half hour, as others have said, went great for he and the other candidate. But the last hour, it's my opinion that the questions were all slanted toward problems that Trump has had, so he was on the defense the entire last hour. He did have a couple of opportunities missed. One was a short question came up on the emails. He got in a quick little quip, but there was a lot of material there that he could have worked with, and apparently hadn't been coached enough on that. If he gets coached at all, I'm be a little surprised, and especially by someone that can do it well. The early voting starts in North Carolina like within the next week or two, so anything being held back through the second or third debate may be a big mistake. So I hope he can turn things around, but I wasn't pleased with last night at all. Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting from Taylor. I mean, here he is, a Trump supporter, and I believe he will still vote for Trump, but he wasn't pleased. But he did kind of hedge it. It wasn't so much, and I'm not sure he's gone now, but I don't know if he was that disappointed in Trump or maybe more disappointed in what he deemed some of the questions. But I don't know that with both of them, you're right, they missed a lot. They didn't go after him on a lot of the things that maybe, be it Benghazi to Trump University, but some of the issues were just like on nuclear power and weapons and all of this stuff. And that's where, on some of them, and this is where I thought the general media criticism came for, targeting Trump, that there was a certain degree of a lack of preparation, which he acknowledged in terms of details. And I wonder if that is something where he'll allow himself to be maybe a little more coached in the future debates? Or again, knowing him and it's worked for him to this point, I can understand him saying, look, I'm going to stay on the template.
One of the difficulties Trump has is that he has been on the media so much,
yeah,
and he's been in front of the public so much that when he says things now, they probably don't have the impact that they initially had. And one of the advantages actually from staying off the Trump stump a little bit is some of the lines that Hillary has probably used in speeches are still coming across as a bit fresher maybe than some of Trump's.
Yeah, that may be. Yeah, I did notice something with Hillary is that, and it's something she's struggled with while she has command of, you know, many of the issues and all this. She, and I'm not saying Trump necessarily does either. He's more of a just come at you guy and aggressive, but she's hard to be warm, Hillary Clinton. And I don't. It was interesting because they showed some clips last night of past debates. And when you talk about warmth and what really grabs people, they had that clip of Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
When he made that comment about his
inexperience.
And how could you not just, when Ronald Reagan, I'm not going to use my opponent's youth, you know, all this, to kind of make fun of his age.
Yes.
And he was so good. And I don't care whether you're a Republican or Democrat. When you heard him say that, you couldn't help but like Ronald Reagan. And I think for Hillary Clinton, you might buy into a lot of what she says issue-wise, but it's hard to warm up to her.
You know,
kind of
one of the clips that has gotten so much attention is one of her debates with Obama, I guess 8 years ago, in which, you know, she's asked, why are you not, you know, not likable? And Obama says, you know, Hillary, you're likable enough.
Well, maybe if it's enough. But yeah, I just get that. That struck me yesterday where she was trying. And, you know, she laughed and smiled a lot. And that was fun. So anyway, we'll take a break. When we come back, we've got a few more phone calls. Our final segment, your take on how things, and whether or not you thought this is really making a difference. Did it change anyone's minds out there? I just thought it was fascinating to watch. To me, it was good TV last night. I enjoyed watching it. We'll take a break and be back with more right after this.